Hello. Today we are going to be looking at Psychology Paper 1 from past to present. More specifically, we're going to be looking into the cognitive assumptions. These are the computer analogy, internal mental processes, and schemas. Now, for some background initially, cognition is concerned with your thought process and other internal mental processes, so like how the mind will make sense of the information it receives and then take an action once that information has been processed. So this is similar to the computer analogy. We have an input, so we receive things, we process it, and then we have an output. So our main cognitive processes that I might mention a couple of times is memory, perception, attention, language, and there are many more. Now, so the first assumption is the computer analogy. So this compares our mind directly to a computer. So our mind has an input of information for senses, or from senses, and we then process this information using a range of our cognitive processes, so it's like our mind kind of works together. And then how we process this input affects our output, how we respond, so it can be our behaviour, our emotions, it's like things we say, we do. So our brain is essentially seen as a piece of hardware, so our biological makeup of the brain is what we sort of start life with, and then our experiences and learned responses are the software. So our software is completely different, so you and I are completely different softwares. However, if our process is wrong, we can sort of have an inappropriate output. An example of this is hostile attribution bias. So it's best explaining this with an example. So our input could be catching eyes with a stranger, or a stranger looking at you and smiling. And if you have hostile attribution during your process, then your output is quite inappropriate. So if you catch eyes or they smile at you, you might think they're laughing at me or they're trying to start a fight with me. So then you'll confront them and you'll be aggressive and loud, when in reality, they may have just been smiling at you. So this kind of analogy is quite easy to understand if you just remember how a computer works and then sort of try and compare it to our mind and how we behave. Now, the next assumption is internal mental processes. So this covers a wide range, like I said before: perception, attention, memory, language, and thinking. So I've kind of put cogs on there because it's a series of independent cognitive systems, and they kind of all work together to understand how we respond to the world. So we don't consciously do this, we don't know we're kind of processing it. We kind of will look at something and go, oh yeah, that's a coat, or there's a pair of shoes. But they must all be successfully working together, otherwise we won't be able to give an appropriate output. So for an example, we could look at a dog, and that's our attention is going to the dog, and then we'll kind of observe its shape, colour, size, so that's our perception of it. And then we'll sort of, from them piece of information, we can recognise it and recall any previous experiences we may have had with a similar dog, so that's our memory coming into play. And then from there we'd be able to name what type of dog it is through our language. So that's basically internal mental processes. It's just a big system that has to work together, and if one cog becomes a little bit faulty, then it can just impact completely how we view the world and how we might respond to a certain situation. Now, finally, the third assumption is schemas. So this is a template, framework, model, mental representation of knowledge that we acquire throughout our life. So here I've said it's a cluster of facts based on previous experiences, and they help us to understand and recognise situations or the world around us. So they grow through disequilibrium. So when we have equilibrium, we have the ability to fully understand what's going on around us using our existing schemas that we have. But when we see something that we don't recognise, it causes this disequilibrium. And we learn new facts to add to the schema. So social interactions can generate future expectations, and the schemas can be changed and reconstructed throughout a person's life, not just whilst you're young. There are two processes, assimilation and accommodation. However, you don't need to know them and explain them for the syllabus. However, if you would like to just to gain a bit more and maybe add it in to kind of make your answer stand out, I've referenced the website that I've got all my information from as well in the description comment below. To continue, there's also Piaget's theory of cognitive development that kind of put the concept of schemas at the very front of cognitive science. So that's there where I've said cognitive development is essentially the development of schemas. So he's kind of saying that the way that we process things changes depending on what we know about the world around us and how it can change. So through social interaction, we learn to create various related schemas. So an example here is at a young age, a child will name everything with four legs and hair a dog. But through that disequilibrium I explained earlier, there are other related schemas. So a cat, so they may see four legs, hair, and think dog, but then a parent or a sibling might say, no, that's a cat meows. And then that's a whole new branch of a schema being created for a cat. So they'll have the similarities, but then in the future, if they hear it meow, they'll think cat. If they hear it bark, they'll think dog. So that's the end of my presentation. So I've gone over the cognitive assumptions with you that are listed there. Thank you for listening. I hope it's been helpful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment them below, or if you have any recommendations for videos that you want to see or any additional things. Thank you for listening.